You're not welcome at the engagement party. We all decided that, my sister sneered. I just smiled, turned around, and walked away. That night, I quietly took back the $18,000 I had paid for the entire event. By morning, my phone was blowing up, 58 missed calls and one frantic voicemail. Imagine dedicating your whole life, pouring your heart, soul, and every last penny into someone you love, only to have them look you straight in the eye, smirk, and tell you you're not invited to the party you paid for. That's precisely what happened to me. And it absolutely crushed me. My name is Rebecca. I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've been there for my younger sister, Kimberly. When our mom got sick, I pretty much raised her. So when she announced her engagement to Tyler, I was thrilled. Without a second thought, I offered to pay the entire $18,000 venue deposit as my gift. I never, not in a million years, imagined that 2 weeks later, I'd be standing in her living room, completely blindsided by betrayal. Growing up in Boston, Kimberly and I shared more than just a bedroom. Despite our 5-year age gap, we were inseparable. I was 12 when she started first grade, and I walked her to school every single day, holding her tiny hand in mine. Our mom, Margaret, was a kindergarten teacher who filled our home with books and laughter. Dad, Thomas, worked long hours as an accountant, but he always made time for our Sunday family dinners. Our home was warm, safe, and full of love. Then everything changed. I was 17. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within months our lives were unrecognizable. Dad was overwhelmed, juggling her medical care and trying to keep his job to maintain our insurance. That's when I stepped up. I learned to cook, to clean, to help Kimberly with her homework. And somehow I still managed to finish high school with honors. Mom fought hard for 2 years, but eventually the cancer won. I was 19 and Kimberly was only 14. I remember holding her as she sobbed at the funeral, promising her I would always be there. In that moment, I meant it with every fiber of my being. College became a complicated dream for me. I'd been accepted to several architecture programs, but leaving Kimberly behind wasn't an option. So I enrolled in a local community college, working part-time at a coffee shop. During my breaks, I'd call home to check if Kimberly had eaten dinner or needed help with a science project. On weekends, I'd take her shopping or to movies, trying to give her some semblance of normalcy. Dad, bless his heart, retreated into his grief and work, often coming home late after Kimberly was asleep. I became both sister and parent, making sure she had what she needed emotionally and physically. After getting my associate degree, I transferred to complete my bachelor's in architecture, meticulously scheduling classes around Kimberly's school events. 3 years after Mom died, Dad introduced us to Diane, a real estate agent he'd been dating. She was polished, ambitious, and clearly saw something in our grieving father. Within 6 months, they were married. I was cautiously optimistic, hoping Diane might bring some happiness back into our home. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly Diane would start favoring Kimberly. Maybe it was because Kimberly was younger and more impressionable, or maybe I reminded her too much of our mother. Whatever the reason, Diane began creating subtle, insidious divisions in our family. She'd take Kimberly shopping for expensive clothes but conveniently forget to invite me. She'd praise Kimberly's average grades excessively while barely acknowledging my Dean's List achievements. Dad either didn't notice or chose not to see it. He seemed relieved that someone else was helping with the parenting duties, which allowed him to work even more. I tried to maintain my relationship with Kimberly despite Diane's influence, but I saw changes happening. The sweet little sister who once followed me everywhere started developing an entitled attitude, expecting things to be handed to her. When Kimberly graduated high school, she announced she wanted to attend an expensive private university across the country. Dad and Diane supported the idea, but they hadn't saved enough for her tuition. So, I stepped in again. I had just landed my first job at an architecture firm and immediately took on a second job bartending on weekends just to help pay for Kimberly's education. I sent her money monthly for 4 years, often skipping meals or living in a tiny studio apartment to make it work. During those college years, Kimberly called less and less. When she did, it was usually because she needed something extra money. For spring break, help with a paper, advice about roommate drama. I always responded with love and support, truly believing that, despite everything, we had a special bond that couldn't be broken. My career as an architect flourished, but my personal life remained stagnant. While friends were getting married and starting families, I was working 60-hour weeks and sending money to Kimberly. Dating seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford in terms of time or emotional energy. My colleague, Sarah, often joked that I was married to my drafting table. After graduating, Kimberly moved back to Boston and landed a marketing job at a prestigious firm, largely due to connections Diane had cultivated. She quickly adapted to a lifestyle that far exceeded her actual income, living in a trendy downtown apartment and wearing designer clothes. Whenever she ran short on rent or maxed out her credit cards, she would show up at my place with tears and promises to do better next time. And I always forgave her. Always. I always helped her. Always believing that underneath the growing selfishness was the little sister who had once looked at me with complete adoration. Then came the Sunday dinner when Kimberly announced her engagement to Tyler Bradley, a wealthy real estate developer whose family owned half the luxury properties in Boston. The diamond on her finger was bigger than any I had ever seen, and the way she looked at him made it clear she believed she had finally arrived at the life she deserved. What I didn't know then was that this engagement would finally show me who my sister had truly become. I was genuinely thrilled for her. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted her to be happy. Tyler seemed kind enough, if a bit reserved. Around our family, he came from old money, generational wealth that made our middle-class background seem almost quaint by comparison. "We're thinking of having the engagement party at the Hamilton estate," Kimberly mentioned casually over brunch. The week after announcing the engagement. The Hamilton estate was the most exclusive venue in Boston, a historic mansion with manicured gardens that was usually booked 2 years in advance. "That's amazing," I said, genuinely impressed. "But isn't it hard to get a reservation there?" Kimberly's face fell slightly. "That's the thing. They had a cancellation for next month, which would be perfect timing. But they require an $18,000 deposit immediately to hold the date. Tyler's parents are covering the wedding, but they're currently in Europe. By the time they get back and transfer the money, the date will be gone." I didn't hesitate. "I can help with that. I've been saving for a down payment on a condo, but this is more important. I want your engagement to be perfect." The way Kimberly's face lit up made any financial concerns vanish from my mind. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. "You've always been there for me, Rebecca. I don't know what I'd do without you." That afternoon, I'd transferred $18,000 to the venue. It was a significant portion of my savings, but I considered it an investment in our relationship. I imagine us getting closer as we planned the party, maybe even healing some of the distance that had grown between us over the years. I met Tyler's parents, Richard and Victoria Bradley, at a dinner the following week. They were polished and poised, with a confident air of people who had never worried about money. Victoria wore a casual outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, while Richard checked his Rolex every few minutes as if to remind everyone of its presence. "So you're the big sister we've heard so much about?" Victoria said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm in architecture," I corrected gently. "I design residential and commercial spaces." "How quaint," she replied before turning her attention back to Kimberly. Throughout dinner, I noticed how Kimberly seemed to shift her personality around the Bradleys. Her voice became higher, her laugh more delicate, her opinions perfectly aligned with theirs. It was as if she was auditioning for the role of perfect daughter-in-law, and it made me sad to see her working so hard to fit into their world. The days following that dinner, I expected to be included in planning meetings for the engagement party. After all, I had paid for the venue, but the invitations went out without my input. The menu was selected without my opinion. The decoration theme was decided without my knowledge. Whenever I called Kimberly to offer help, she was suspiciously busy. "Oh, I'm just running into a meeting." Or, "Tyler and I are having dinner with his parents." Or Diane and I are checking out florists right now. I started to notice that Diane was mentioned frequently in these planning conversations. My stepmother had apparently taken center stage in helping Kimberly create the perfect engagement party, despite not contributing financially. 3 weeks before the event, I ran into our cousin Jessica at a local coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, which immediately set off alarm bells. "Are you excited about Kimberly's engagement party?" I asked casually, stirring my coffee. Jessica looked down at her hands. "Actually, I wasn't sure if I should mention it. I got the invitation yesterday, but I noticed your name wasn't on the family table seating chart they included." My heart sank. "That must be a mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm the one who paid for the venue." Jessica's pitying look told me everything I needed to know. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I thought you knew." That evening, I drove to Kimberly's apartment, my mind racing with possible explanations. Perhaps there was a miscommunication. Maybe Jessica had misunderstood the seating chart. There had to be a logical reason why I, of all people, would be excluded from an event I had financially made possible. When I arrived, I was surprised to see several cars parked outside, including Diane's Mercedes and what I recognized as the Bradleys' Bentley. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell, unprepared for the confrontation that was about to change everything. Kimberly opened the door, her smile faltering when she saw me standing there. Behind her, I could see Diane sitting with Victoria Bradley on the living room sofa, their heads close together in conversation. Tyler and his father, Richard, stood by the fireplace, drinks in hand. There were a few other people I recognized as Kimberly's friends from her new social circle. "Rebecca," Kimberly said, her voice tight, "we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Can we talk for a minute privately?" Kimberly glanced back at the group before stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind her. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "I ran into Jessica today. She mentioned that my name wasn't on the seating chart for the engagement party." For a moment, Kimberly looked trapped, like she was calculating her options. Then her expression shifted to one of practiced concern. "I was going to talk to you about that. It's just that the venue has limited capacity and Tyler's family has so many important business associates that need to be there. The venue that I paid for," I said quietly. "My entire $18,000 savings." She had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but it passed quickly. "And I'm so grateful for that. Really, I am. But this party is really important for Tyler's family connections, and we need to make the right impression." "And I would somehow prevent that?" I asked, the hurt in my voice unmistakable. Before Kimberly could answer, the door opened and Diane stepped out. "Is everything all right out here, Kimberly?" Victoria was asking about the wine selection. "Everything's fine," Kimberly said quickly. "Rebecca was just leaving." Diane looked at me with false concern. "Oh, Rebecca, did Kimberly explain the situation?" "It's really for the best, dear. These social events have certain expectations." Something in her tone made me realize this wasn't a new conversation. "You knew about this. You helped plan this." Diane had the audacity to look offended. Kimberly needed guidance for navigating Tyler's social circle. I was simply helping her make the right choices. The right choice was to exclude the person who made this party possible in the first place. I could feel my voice rising and made an effort to control it. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside," Diane suggested, glancing nervously at the neighboring houses. Despite my better judgment, I followed them into the apartment. The conversation in the living room halted as I entered, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Victoria Bradley's expression was particularly cold, as if I was a server who had wandered into the wrong area of a restaurant. "Is everything all right?" Tyler asked, looking uncomfortable. "Rebecca has some concerns about the engagement party guest list," Kimberly explained, her voice suddenly taking on a patronizing tone I had never heard her use with me before. "I'm concerned about not being invited to an event I paid for," I clarified, looking directly at Tyler. "Did you know that I provided the $18,000 deposit for Hamilton Estate?" Tyler looked genuinely surprised. I thought that came from your joint family fund. There is no joint family fund, I said. That was my personal savings money I've been putting aside for years to buy my own place. Victoria Bradley set down her wine glass with a sharp click. Kimberly, perhaps you should explain the situation to your sister. Kimberly's face hardened. In a way I had never seen before. The truth is, Rebecca, we decided it would be better if you weren't there. Your presence would be complicated. Complicated how? I demanded. Diane stepped in smoothly. Rebecca, dear, you know how you can get. You're so emotional sometimes, and this event needs to be perfect. We've explained to the Bradleys about your difficulties after your mother passed. I was stunned into silence. My difficulties had been working 2 jobs to support our family while grieving my mother. I looked at Kimberly, expecting her to defend me, but she was staring at the floor. I see, I said quietly. So, you've been telling Tyler's family that I'm unstable? Not unstable, Diane backpedaled. Just not quite suited for the social environment of the engagement party. Let's be direct, Victoria Bradley interjected. We understand you've had some emotional issues over the years. Outbursts, dependency problems. Tyler's father is running for city council next year, and we simply can't risk any scenes. I looked at each face in the room, finally understanding what was happening. These are lies. Who told you these things about me? No one answered, but Diane and Kimberly exchanged a quick glance that told me everything. So, you used me for the money? I said to Kimberly, the truth finally dawning on me. You knew I would pay, and then you planned all along to exclude me. Kimberly finally looked up, and what I saw in her eyes chilled me. There was no shame, no regret, just cold calculation. You always pay, Rebecca. That's what you do. You've been trying to buy my love since Mom died, and I've let you because it seemed to make you happy. The cruelty of her words knocked the breath from my lungs. I wasn't trying to buy your love. I was trying to take care of you, like I promised Mom I would. Kimberly rolled her eyes, emboldened by her audience. Well, I don't need your kind of care anymore. I have people who actually understand the world I belong in now. The world you belong in, I repeated, incredulous. Kimberly, these people barely know you. I've known you your entire life. And that's exactly the problem, she said, her voice hardening. You know the old me, the one from before? I've outgrown that person, and I've outgrown needing a sister who reminds everyone where I came from every time she opens her mouth. I looked around the room again, noticing the uncomfortable expressions, the averted gazes. No one was going to stand up for me, not even my own father, who was conspicuously absent from this gathering. So that's it, I asked. You take my money and then discard me because I don't fit your new image. Kimberly straightened her shoulders and, with a final glance at Victoria Bradley for approval, she delivered the line that would forever change our relationship. We all agreed. You're not invited to the engagement party. And then she smiled. Not the warm smile of my little sister, but a cold, triumphant smirk that revealed the stranger she had become. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the finality of what had just happened. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the apartment, down the stairs and to my car. It wasn't until I was safely inside with the doors locked that I allowed the tears to come streaming down my face as I realized that I had lost not just $18,000, but the sister I thought I had. The drive home from Kimberly's apartment was a blur of streetlights and tears. My mind kept replaying the scene over and over, the smirk on my sister's face, the condescending tone in Diane's voice, the cold judgment in Victoria Bradley's eyes. Each memory was another knife twisting in my heart. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my sadness had begun crystallizing into something else. Clarity, resolve, a determination I hadn't felt in years. Inside my small but meticulously designed home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen island, staring at nothing in particular. The truth I had been avoiding for years was finally impossible to ignore. Kimberly had been using me. Perhaps she always had been, but I had been too blind, too desperate to maintain our connection to see it. I thought about all the times I had come to her rescue, the rent payments when she forgot to budget properly, The credit card bills I paid when she maxed out her cards on a weekend shopping spree with friends. The countless emotional crises I had talked her through while putting my own needs aside. And now, the $18,000 for a party I wouldn't even be allowed to attend. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let this happen, not this time. I reached for my phone and called Michael, a lawyer friend who had been trying to date me for months. I had always been too busy taking care of Kimberly's problems to give him a real chance. "Rebecca," he answered, sounding pleasantly surprised. "This is unexpected." "I need legal advice," I said, getting straight to the point. "If I give someone money for a specific purpose and they accept it under false pretenses, do I have any recourse?" Michael's tone immediately shifted to professional concern. "That depends on several factors. Can you give me some details?" I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady as I recounted the humiliation I had just experienced. Michael listened without interrupting, and I could almost picture him taking notes on the other end of the line. "The good news," he said when I finished, "is that this sounds like a conditional gift. You provided the money specifically for an event you expected to attend. Do you have any documentation of this understanding?" I thought for a moment. "I have text messages where Kimberly specifically asks me to help with the venue deposit so she can have her engagement party there. And I have the transfer receipt that clearly states for Kimberly's engagement party at Hamilton Estate in the memo line." "That's helpful," Michael said. "Here's what I would suggest. First, gather all your documentation. Then contact the venue directly. Explain that you were the one who provided the deposit and that it was given under conditions that have not been met. Most reputable venues don't want to be involved in family disputes and might be willing to refund the money rather than get entangled." "Can I do that? Just ask for my money back?" "You can certainly try," Michael said. "The worst they can say is no, but given that the event hasn't happened yet, you have a reasonable case for the return of funds." After thanking Michael and promising to update him, I spent the next hour compiling evidence, text messages, bank statements, email confirmations from the venue. I organized everything into a folder, my architect's precision serving me well in this task. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept racing between hurt and anger, between grief for the relationship I thought I had and determination to stand up for myself for once. By morning, I had a plan. The Hamilton Estate opened at 9 a.m. I was in the parking lot at 8:30 a.m. Dressed in my most professional outfit, the folder of documentation tucked into my leather portfolio. When Amanda, the venue manager, arrived, I was waiting calmly by the entrance. "Miss Wilson," she looked surprised to see me. "We don't have an appointment scheduled today, do we?" "No, but I'm hoping you might have a few minutes to discuss my sister's engagement party," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. "There's been a complication." Amanda hesitated, then nodded. "I can give you 15 minutes before my first meeting." In her office, I laid out the situation as concisely as possible, presenting my documentation without emotional embellishment. Amanda's expression shifted from professional politeness to genuine concern as the story unfolded. "Let me understand correctly," she said when I finished. "You provided the deposit for an event you've now been explicitly told you cannot attend." "That's correct," I confirmed. "I would never have paid for the venue if I had known I would be excluded from the celebration." Amanda tapped her pen against her desk. "Technically, the contract is with your sister, not you, even though you provided the payment." My heart sank, but I kept my composure. "I understand, but ethically speaking, the situation is clear. My money was accepted under false pretenses." After a long moment, Amanda nodded. "The Hamilton Estate prides itself on integrity. We don't want to host events funded by deception." She pulled out a form from her desk. "This is a deposit cancellation form. Since we're still 30 days out from the event, our policy allows for a full refund minus a small administrative fee. Under the circumstances, I'm willing to waive even that fee." Relief flooded through me as I watched her fill out the paperwork. "What about my sister's event?" "We'll contact her today to inform her that the reservation has been canceled due to payment issues," she said. "She'd be welcome to rebook if she can provide new payment immediately, but I should warn you that We now have other interested parties for that date. 2 hours later, I checked my bank account and saw the deposit. $17,950. Almost the full amount returned to my account. The emotion I felt wasn't triumph or vindication, but something more complex. A mixture of sadness for what I had lost, and a strange sense of empowerment for finally standing up for myself. I knew what would happen next. Kimberly would be furious. Diane would be outraged. The perfect engagement party at the perfect venue was slipping through their fingers. There would be calls, texts, perhaps even a confrontation. I wasn't ready to face any of it yet. I needed time to process, to strengthen my resolve before the inevitable storm. I packed a small overnight bag, turned off my phone, and checked into a boutique hotel downtown. As I sat on the plush bed, staring out at the Boston skyline, I felt a strange sense of peace beneath the pain. For the first time in years, I had chosen myself over Kimberly. It hurt, but it also felt like the first step toward healing a wound that had been festering for far too long. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains and a moment of disorientation. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. With a deep breath, I turned on my phone. The screen lit up with notifications. 58 missed calls, 37 voicemails, 93 text messages. My phone continued to buzz as new messages arrived, as if the device itself was angry with me. I started with the voicemails, putting the phone on speaker, as I made coffee from the hotel room's small machine. "Rebecca, call me back immediately." Kimberly's voice was shrill with panic. "The venue just called? What did you do?" The next message, left 20 minutes later. "This isn't funny, Rebecca. The Hamilton estate says our reservation is canceled. Call me now." As the messages progressed, Kimberly's tone shifted from panic to fury. "You vindictive expletive. How could you do this to me after everything I've done for you?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity of that statement. What exactly had Kimberly ever done for me? Diane's messages were equally venomous but more calculated. "Rebecca, this childish behavior is exactly why we decided it was best for you not to attend. Your father is extremely disappointed in you. Call us immediately so we can fix the mess you created." My father's messages were fewer, but cut deeper. "Becky," he said, using my childhood nickname. "I don't know what's going on between you girls, but this isn't the way to handle it. Call me, please." The text messages told a similar story, ranging from Kimberly's all-caps rage to Tyler's more measured attempts at intervention. "We had important people coming to this party. You've ruined everything," Kimberly had written. "Rebecca, I understand you're upset, but this is affecting a lot of people. Can we talk?" That was from Tyler. The most recent messages had taken on a pleading tone. "Please, Rebecca, I'm sorry for what I said." I was stressed and not thinking. "Clearly, we can work this out," Kimberly had texted just an hour ago. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, sipping my coffee. The desperation in those latest messages told me everything I needed to know. The Bradleys were probably furious. Their son's engagement party, which was meant to be a social showcase ahead of Richard's political aspirations, was suddenly in jeopardy, and they were blaming Kimberly. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction, but it was overshadowed by sadness. How had we reached this point? When had my sweet little sister turned into someone who would use and discard me without a second thought? I sent a single text to my friend Sarah. "Need to talk. Are you free for lunch?" Sarah responded immediately. "Always for you." Madison's Cafe at 12 o'clock. Sarah was waiting when I arrived at the small cafe near her office. One look at my face and she stood up, wrapping me in a tight hug. "That bad?" she asked as we sat down. "Worse," I replied, and then I told her everything. The engagement announcement, the venue deposit, the cruel exclusion. The smirk on Kimberly's face when she told me I wasn't welcome. The recovery of my money, the subsequent explosion of messages. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to outrage to sympathy. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself," she said. "It's about time." "I feel terrible," I admitted. "Not about taking my money back, but about the fact that it came to this." She's still my sister. Is she, though? Sarah asked gently. A sister who treats you this way? Who lies about you to make herself look better to her fiancé's family? Who takes your money and then excludes you from the very event you paid for? I had no answer for that. What are you going to do now? Sarah asked. I don't know, I confessed. Part of me wants to just cut all ties and move on. But there's still this little voice inside me that remembers the girl who used to follow me around the house, who would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. That girl is gone, Rebecca, Sarah said softly, and it's not your fault. It's time to accept that and protect yourself. As we were finishing lunch, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize.
Hello, I answered cautiously. Rebecca, this is Victoria Bradley, Tyler's mother.
My stomach dropped. Mrs. Bradley, what can I do for you? You can explain why you sabotaged my son's engagement party, she said, her voice cold. I didn't sabotage anything, I replied calmly. I simply reclaimed money that was taken under false pretenses. Kimberly tells a different story, Victoria said. She says you've always been jealous of her, that you have some sort of obsessive attachment that's becoming concerning. Anger flared inside me. That's absolutely false. I've supported Kimberly emotionally and financially for years. I paid for her college education. I've bailed her out of financial trouble countless times. And I graciously offered to pay for the venue deposit because I wanted to contribute to her happiness. Then why withdraw the money? Victoria pressed. Because I was explicitly told. I wasn't welcome at an event I had paid for, I said simply. Would you pay for a party you weren't allowed to attend, Mrs. Bradley? The silence on the other end told me I had made my point. I see, she finally said. Well, this has created quite an uncomfortable situation for everyone involved. I'm sure it has, I replied. But perhaps the uncomfortable situation began when lies were told about me to justify my exclusion. After hanging up, I knew what I needed to do next. The whispered lies needed to be confronted with documented truth. I spent the afternoon drafting a carefully worded email, attaching evidence of my financial support of Kimberly over the years, including her college tuition payments and the numerous times I had covered her expenses. I included screenshots of our text exchanges about the venue deposit, making it clear that I had offered the money with the understanding that I would be celebrating alongside her. I addressed the email to my entire extended family, as well as to Tyler and his parents. The subject line was simple: the truth about why I withdrew the engagement party deposit. The email wasn't vengeful or accusatory. It was factual and direct. I explained that I had been told I wasn't welcome at the engagement party by Kimberly herself, that Diane had apparently been spreading falsehoods about my mental stability to Tyler's family, and that I had chosen to reclaim my money rather than finance my own exclusion. I have always supported Kimberly and will continue to wish her happiness, I wrote in conclusion, but I can no longer allow myself to be used financially while being discarded emotionally. I hope this clarifies the situation for everyone involved. I pressed send before I could second-guess myself. Within hours, responses began trickling in. My Aunt Patricia expressed shock and sympathy. I had no idea this was happening, Rebecca. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? My cousin Jessica confirmed that she had heard Diane making concerning comments about my fragility at a family gathering months ago, but hadn't understood the context until now. Even my Uncle Robert, who rarely involved himself in family drama, sent a brief but supportive message. Always thought you were the strong one. Still do. Here if you need anything. As evening fell, there was a knock at my hotel room door. When I checked the peephole, I saw my father standing in the hallway, his face lined with worry.
Taking a
deep breath, I opened the door, bracing myself for whatever might come next. My father looked older than I remembered, standing in the hotel hallway with slumped shoulders. His eyes, so similar to my own, were clouded with confusion and distress. Rebecca, he said, his voice rough. Can I come in? I stepped aside to let him enter, noticing how he surveyed the hotel room with a puzzled expression, as if he couldn't understand why I wasn't at home. Diane told me you'd be here, he explained, answering my unspoken question. The hotel called your emergency contact when you extended your stay. Of course, I had forgotten that I'd listed my father as my emergency contact years ago and never changed it. Why are you here, Dad? I asked, keeping my voice neutral as I sat in one of the room's armchairs. He remained standing, hands in his pockets. Kimberly is devastated. The engagement party is falling apart. The Bradleys are threatening to call off the wedding entirely. How are you, Rebecca? I heard what happened, and I'm concerned about you. His first thoughts were for Kimberly, as they had always been since Diane entered our lives. That sounds like a problem of Kimberly's making, I said quietly. And Diane's. His face hardened slightly. This isn't like you, Rebecca. You've always been the responsible one, the peacemaker. What's gotten into you? Maybe I'm tired of being taken advantage of, I replied. Maybe I finally reached my breaking point when my sister told me to my face that I wasn't welcome at a party I paid for. And my stepmother told her future in-laws that I'm mentally unstable. Dad's expression faltered. Diane wouldn't do that? She's always had the family's best interests at heart. Has she? I challenged, rising to retrieve my laptop. Let me show you something. I opened my email and showed him the documented evidence I had compiled. The text messages where Kimberly specifically asked for money for the venue. The bank transfer showing years of financial support. The message from my cousin confirming Diane's comments about my supposed instability. The email from Amanda at Hamilton Estate confirming that I had been the one to pay the deposit, not the family fund that had been mentioned to Tyler. As he read through the evidence, my father's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and finally a dawning horror. I didn't know, he said, his voice barely audible. I had no idea it had gone this far. How could you know? I asked, not unkindly. You've been letting Diane manage the family dynamics for years. You checked out after Mom died, Dad, you handed over your parental role to me when it came to Kimberly, and then you let Diane create whatever narrative suited her. He sank down onto the edge of the bed, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. After your mother died, I was lost. Diane seemed so capable, so sure of herself. She took control when I couldn't. And that was convenient for you, I said, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. But while you were finding comfort with Diane, I was working 2 jobs to put Kimberly through college. I was sacrificing my own dreams to fulfill the promise I made to Mom. I never asked you to do that, he protested weakly. You never asked me not to, I countered. You never said, Rebecca, you're 20 years old. You don't need to be responsible for your sister's education. You never said, let me help with that burden. You just accepted my sacrifice as if it was expected. Tears welled in his eyes, and for a moment he looked like the father I remembered from before. Mom's illness, the one who used to read me bedtime stories and taught me how to ride a bike. I failed you, he admitted, his voice breaking. I was so consumed by my own grief that I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. And then when Diane came along, she drove a wedge between us. I finished for him. She favored Kimberly because Kimberly was younger, more impressionable. She could shape Kimberly into what she wanted. But I was already formed, already too much like Mom. Dad nodded slowly, the truth finally penetrating years of willful blindness. Diane always said you were too independent, too stubborn. She said you didn't need our help the way Kimberly did. And you believed her, I said, the old hurt surfacing. You let her rewrite our family story. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of years of misunderstanding hanging between us. What can I do? He finally asked, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. How do I fix this? I don't know if you can fix it, Dad, I said honestly. But you can start by standing up to Diane, by telling Kimberly that her behavior is unacceptable, by being the father I needed all those years ago.
He nodded, looking determined despite his tears. I will, I promise.
As if on cue, there was another knock at the door, this one more insistent. Through the peephole, I saw Diane and Kimberly, both looking flushed with anger. It's them, I told my father.
He stood up straighter. Let me handle this.
But when I opened the door, Diane pushed past him immediately, her eyes flashing with fury. What have you done? She demanded, waving her phone in my face. The entire family is turning against us because of your email. Kimberly followed her in, mascara streaking her cheeks. Tyler's parents want to call off the engagement. They say I'm too much drama, that my family is dysfunctional. This is all your fault. My father stepped between us. That's enough, both of you. Diane looked at him in shock. Thomas, whose side are you on? Your daughter has deliberately sabotaged Kimberly's engagement. No, he said firmly. Rebecca reclaimed money that was taken under false pretenses. Money she worked hard for while the rest of us were taking her for granted. Kimberly's mouth fell open. Dad, you can't be serious. She's always been jealous of me. She can't stand that I'm finally happy. Stop it, Kimberly, my father said, his voice sharper than I had heard it in years. I've seen the evidence. I know what really happened. And I'm ashamed that my daughters have become strangers to each other largely because I wasn't paying attention. Diane's strategy shifted instantly. Her expression softened, and she placed a hand on my father's arm. Thomas, you're upset. We all are. Let's go home and discuss this as a family without airing our dirty laundry in a hotel room. My father gently removed her hand. No, I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years. You and Kimberly owe Rebecca an apology, not more manipulation. Kimberly's face contorted with rage. I'm not apologizing to her. She ruined everything. The Bradleys think I'm from some crazy family now. Maybe we are a bit crazy, my father said quietly. But not in the way you think. We're crazy because we've allowed money and status to become more important than loyalty and love. We're crazy because we've forgotten what family actually means. Diane's facade cracked completely. This is ridiculous. Rebecca has always played the victim, always made everything about her. She couldn't stand that Kimberly was finally going to have something special. Something that didn't involve her constant supervision and judgment. I had remained silent throughout this exchange, watching the family dynamics I had lived with for years play out in front of me, but now I stepped forward. I don't need an apology, I said calmly. What I need is respect. What I need is for the lies to stop. What I need is to be treated like a person with feelings, not an ATM with an endless supply of emotional and financial support. Kimberly scoffed. Always so self-righteous. You think you're so much better than everyone else. No, I replied. I just finally realized that I deserve better than this, better than being used and discarded, better than being lied about, better than sacrificing everything for people who don't even like me, let alone love me. The room fell silent. My father looked between his daughters, the pain of recognition clear on his face. Diane's mouth was set in a thin, angry line. And Kimberly, my little sister who once followed me everywhere, looked at me as if I was a stranger. I think you should leave now, I said quietly. All of you. I need time to think about what happens. Next, Rebecca, my father began, but I shook my head. You too, Dad, I appreciate that you're starting to understand, but I need space right now. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded. I'll call you tomorrow if that would be okay. I agreed. Diane made one last attempt. This isn't over, Rebecca. You've created a mess that affects all of us. No, Diane, I said, opening the door. The mess was already there. I just finally stopped cleaning it up for everyone else. As they filed out, Kimberly paused in the doorway. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the sister I used to know in her eyes, a flash of regret or uncertainty. But then it was gone, replaced by cold resentment as she followed Diane down the hallway. I closed the door behind them, leaning against it as tears slid down my cheeks, but these weren't tears of defeat or despair. They were tears of release, of finally setting down a burden I had carried for far too long. 3 months can change everything, or so I discovered. Spring had given way to summer, and Boston was alive with color and energy. I sat at an outdoor cafe watching people stroll along the sidewalk, many of them tourists exploring the historic city. My phone buzzed. With a text from my therapist, Dr. Harris, looking forward to our session tomorrow. Don't forget to bring your journal, I smiled as I replied. Seeking therapy had been one of the first decisions I made after the confrontation at the hotel. I needed professional help to unpack years of family dynamics and to learn how to set boundaries without guilt. Dr. Harris had been instrumental in helping me understand that my worth wasn't tied to what I could do for others, particularly my sister. The changes in my family had been significant. My father, true to his word, had begun standing up to Diane. Their relationship was strained as a result. But he seemed more authentic than he had in years. We were meeting weekly for lunch, slowly. Rebuilding our relationship, one honest conversation at a time. "I've enabled so much dysfunction," he had admitted during our most recent lunch. "In trying to avoid conflict, I created something much worse." Some extended family members had reached out after my email, sharing their own experiences with Diane's manipulations. My Aunt Patricia had become a particularly strong ally, often checking in on me and sharing stories about my mother that helped me feel connected to her memory. Kimberly and Tyler had still gotten engaged, though with a much smaller party at a restaurant rather than the Hamilton estate. According to family gossip, Victoria Bradley had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that was heavily tilted in Tyler's favor. The wedding was scheduled for the following year, but rumors suggested there was trouble in paradise already. Diane had attempted damage control by telling anyone who would listen that I had suffered a mental break, but few believed her now. The evidence I had shared was too compelling, and her own behavior too transparent. As for my own life, it had blossomed in unexpected ways. With the weight of constant family drama lifted from my shoulders, I had finally found the energy to focus on myself. I redecorated my small house, creating a space that reflected my personality rather than serving as a way station between work and family obligations. I used some of the recovered money to take a solo trip to Barcelona, something I had dreamed of since architecture school. Walking through Gaudi's masterpieces, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. My career was thriving too. I had taken on more creative projects at the firm, and my boss had mentioned the possibility of a partnership track in the near future. Without the constant interruptions of Kimberly's crises, I was able to fully commit to my professional growth. But perhaps the most unexpected development came in the form of David Harrison, an old college friend who had recently returned to Boston after years working abroad. We had bumped into each other at a professional networking event, and the connection was immediate. "Rebecca Wilson,"
he had said, his face lighting up with recognition.
"I always wondered what happened to the most talented designer in our class." We had started with coffee, which turned into dinner, which evolved into weekend hiking trips and long conversations about everything from sustainable architecture to our favorite books. David was kind, thoughtful, and most importantly, he saw. Not as someone's sister or daughter, not as a source of support or money, but as a complete person with my own dreams and value. "What are you thinking about?" A voice interrupted my reverie. David slid into the chair across from me, setting down 2 iced coffees. "Just reflecting on how much has changed," I replied with a smile. "Good changes?" he asked, his eyes warm. With interest. "Mostly," I nodded. "It's still hard sometimes. I miss the sister I thought I had, but I don't miss the reality of what our relationship had become." David reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "That's growth." Acknowledging the loss while recognizing it was necessary. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my father. "Lunch tomorrow still on? I have news." I texted back a quick confirmation, curious about what his news might be. Our relationship was still healing, but each honest conversation brought us closer to a genuine connection. The $18,000 that had catalyzed all this change was now safely back in my savings account. Growing toward the down payment on a condo, I had my eye on money that was finally being used for my future, not to buy approval or connection from people who couldn't truly give it. "By the way," David said, "I got tickets to that architecture exhibition you mentioned. The one showcasing women designers throughout history." The thoughtfulness of the gesture warmed me. This was what genuine care looked like, not manipulation. Not transaction, but simple attention to what mattered to me. As we sat there in the summer sunshine talking about our plans for the weekend, I realized that walking away from toxic relationships hadn't left me alone, as I had feared. Instead, it had created space for healthier connections to form, for authentic relationships to flourish. The path hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, nights of tears, days when the weight of family expectation had threatened to pull me back into old patterns. But each time I had stood firm in my new boundaries, it had gotten a little easier. I thought about Kimberly sometimes, wondering if she ever reflected on what we had lost. Part of me hoped that someday she might recognize the destructive patterns and break free of them. That maybe years from now we might find a new way to be sisters. One based on mutual respect rather than obligation and exploitation. But that was her journey to make, not mine to manage. My responsibility was to myself now, to nurturing the life and relationships that brought me joy rather than drained me. As David and I finished our coffees and began walking toward the waterfront, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who had once paid for her own exclusion, who had accepted crumbs of affection in exchange for years of support, was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who understood that self-respect wasn't selfish but necessary. That sometimes walking away is the strongest form of love you can show.